Art teachers of Reddit. What's you draw anything you want story? I've had some really funny ones, but this one is not, and reminds me, whenever I think of it, to consider kids' circumstances. I worked in a low-income high-immigrant population school. This girl was amazing, outspoken, kind, great grasp of English. She drew a picture of her brother and her. I asked her who else was in the picture, since there appeared to be part of a third person. She calmly replied, "That's my brother's head. He was killed in our village, right before we went to the refugee camp." I look her up and down and say something sympathetic, masking my horror. "Yeah, they came into my village, grabbed all the boys, and were going to take them away. My brother and his friend tried to run, so they cut off his head. I was standing right there. Would you like me to draw you a picture?" I said no thank you. I asked where her little brother, also in art class, was when this happened. "Oh, we dressed him up like a girl. He makes a cute girl." I should mention before the above exchange we were talking about One Direction or something totally banal. I was a K-12 ESL teacher and worked in schools with high refugee populations. It was heartbreaking to hear some of the stories of the traumas they experienced, and like yours, it would come out at the most innocuous times, usually through drawing or writing. This is a consistent theme, I think. I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house as a kid, and their neighbor was a Holocaust survivor. She didn't often talk about it, but when she did, it would come out in the oddest, most mundane conversation. The most vivid example I can remember, I was in maybe 3rd grade, and talking about being allowed to clean my classroom's blackboard erasers and what I could and couldn't erase at the end of the day, and she just remarked that whenever someone's name was written on the blackboard in her school, you knew you'd never see them again. So after the teacher wrote them, someone would try to erase the names without getting caught, or they'd be on the blackboard for days, and nobody wanted to look at those names. Then just carried on the conversation, as if nothing had happened, and asked me about school, and it was always something like that. A totally innocent, innocuous conversation led to these horrible revelations. I suppose it's good she did talk about it, although I wonder if she ever did with her family. I think, in a way, it might be easier to talk about by just blindsiding an acquaintance. My favorite professor in college was little during one of the more recent civil wars in Sri Lanka. She took the Peace and Conflict Studies capstone class on an overpass trip, where we all slept on the floor of a retreat center, and out of nowhere was like, "This is nice. It reminds me of the war." She notices everyone trying not to look at her weird and says, "Well, there were nice parts of the war, too." Everyone, all the neighbors, would get together and sleep over. I like that. Resilience is a thing, I guess. I just remembered a poor little guy who drew a self-portrait. He drew with meticulous detail, and when it came down to drawing his pants, he drew the zipper so carefully, but it looked like a penis. I was flummoxed about how to tell him that people might see something there that he didn't intend. Did you end up telling him? What was his reaction? I did tell him, and he was so embarrassed I thought he was going to pass out. This is 6th grade. AWW. Poor kid. It reminds me of the time I had to draw a gingerbread man for class. I screwed up the limbs, and it ended up looking like some sort of pea squid. My teacher didn't say anything, but my friends sure did. Not my story, but seems to fit here. When I was in school, to certify to become a teacher, we had a former principal as a professor for one of our courses who was trying to illustrate how difficult it can be to manage parent complaints and how to approach those situations with administration. His example was how he had been called into a conference once with an angry mom and the elementary school art teacher. The mom was furious because the teacher had asked the children to close their eyes and draw whatever came into their imagination. His assumption was that a student had drawn something inappropriate. Nope. The mom was mad because summoning an image in one's mind was witchcraft. Summonus Imagius. I was substitute teaching an art class and 8th grader drew a picture of an adult woman molesting a child. I pulled the student aside after class and found out her aunt had been molesting her for years when she was babysit or came to visit. I reported it and her aunt ended up going to prison. Kids will sometimes draw things they wouldn't normally say out loud. Ugh. Reminds me of a webcomic called Clarissa. She was raped and molested by her father, and in class she had drawn a wolf taking advantage of a chipmunk. The teacher laughed it off and didn't think anything of it, thinking that wasn't what Clarissa meant to draw. Glad you reported it though. Clarissa is a seriously fucked up comic. No pun intended. It is a whole series about this little girl who is being molested and the ways it makes her act out to the oblivious adults in her life. Hey, I was looking at this comic and confused by the website. Are there really only like 10 pieces/chapters? I got in trouble once for drawing a pooping butt. Little did my teacher know, but the drawing was actually a poorly drawn butterfly that ended up looking like a hairy pooping butt, and when asked why I put the details I did, like the legs and antenna and proboscidea coming off the segmented body, I said I dunno. Don't they all look like that? I saw one at recess and thought it was pretty and wanted to draw it. Thinking of the butterfly, of course. Nope. I ended up having to see the school counselor. Never assume what kids are trying to draw. Always ask. Yes. I worked at a summer day camp, and one of the 4-year-old kids drew something that looked remarkably like male genitalia, and everyone panicked and parents and psychologists got involved. And finally someone asked him what he drew. He said it's a cannon. Look at it. It's on wheels. People are so quick to jump to trauma. It reminds me of a child who painted the sky black and the teachers were going crazy until someone asked why, and the kid simply said it was night. A professor in my college told that story in an academic event we held some years ago. In early middle school, we did a project where we used cardboard draped in colorful paper mache to make a sound word, like wham or crinkle. I was really into knights at the time, so I made the word that was the sound of someone unsheathing a sword. That word was sklang. Apostrophe. Ah. Yes. The sound of unsheathing your sword. Mein Gottlord. Sklang. He stood in the still of the silence, bereft, the last of his unit, the only one left. His breastplate was bloody, his dagger was blunt. He stared at the army that waited in front. They gathered in masses with weapon and shield. They pulled back their bows as they marched on the field. They came without mercy. They came without fear. They came as he watched through the mist of a tear. But if it was time he was destined to die, I'll do it with courage, he said with a sigh. His movements were nimble. His fingers were quick. He pulled down his helmet and took out his dick. I love this one. Thanks. My brother was told to draw an animal from any angle he wanted, so he drew a dot and said it was a very far away lion. I love that. It's not drawing, but I gave my high school kids a poetry assignment. They could write about anything that was school appropriate and have one curse word that wasn't a slur or the F-bomb. It had to include so much figurative language. ECT. Girl turns in MS. My name is a bitch. A poem about how she's tired of writing poems and that she's annoyed with me for assigning so many includes all requirements. I have her a 96, a few errors, and the next poem she writes is MS. My name is a cool bitch about how she was sorry she was mean. Solid response. Sometimes the only way kids feel comfortable airing their grievances is through their creativity. High school 1977. Not a teacher. While everyone else was drawing Pink Floyd rainbows and peace signs all over everything, the biggest burnout in the class made a white metal bracelet with intricate triangular designs cut out of it. He turned it in and got a great grade for the first project he ever bothered finishing, and some well-deserved praise for his effort. Teacher handed our work back, and first thing he did was grab a pair of pliers and bent all the triangles outward, making it a thick metal spiked bracelet. I found that devilishly, disturbingly clever. A lone punk rocker in a sea of hippies. As a kid was told to do a drawing that was gonna be put on a plate. Drew my cat doing a poo. I was asked multiple times if I wanted to redo it. I declined the offer. So most of my life I ate off a plate with my cat on it doing a poo, as it was my plate. And still do. My siblings had similar plate with a car and a rocket ship. Mine is clearly much better. Was around 5 or 6 at the time and totally worth it. Still have the plate. 2000 years later, an ancient artifact. It seems to be the replication of a feline defecating painted onto this plate. Clearly it has ritual significance. Narrator on the History Channel. Is this plate part of an ancient alien cult? What mysteries lie in this defecating feline? Was it some form deity? Cut to old historian in his study. I've spent my life studying this plate. It's truly a unique relic from the 21st century. Its mystery might never be uncovered.